All right, I want to welcome everybody out to the next action-packed session of ConsensusCON. We're really excited to have everybody out today and appreciate you taking the time. Today's session is entitled 6 Types of Video Content to Help Progress Your Sales Cycle. We've got Thomas Edwards with us today, who's the Senior Manager Finance Transformation for EMEA at Trintech. Thomas, we've worked together with Thomas on a couple of things over the last few months, and he's a really great presenter and really excited to have him here with us. You may have caught some of Thomas's work on the Pre-Sales Collective, some articles that he's written on LinkedIn recently and so on about how they've been using demo automation to supercharge their pre-sales processes. And so we really appreciate him taking the time today. Sorry about that. If this is your first session of ConsensusCON, let me just, this is me just, it's like it's my first time. I'm just going to enable my video here. If this is your first session of ConsensusCON, we're really focused at this user conference on helping our customers and future customers to scale pre-sales. Really by getting the most out of Consensus demo automation. And our lineup consists of some of our most successful accounts, our top accounts, industry experts. They're usually both. And we're also happy to announce newly created forums, user forums that you can access on the website to help kind of build community, share best practices and things like that. We'll also be starting a new monthly webinar series beginning in December that will focus specifically on users. You may be familiar with our Scaling Pre-Sales webinar, which is sort of broadly applicable to pre-sales. We're also going to have this new webinar series will be focused on user tips, best practices, how-tos, things like that. We are recording this session, and the recordings will be made available on the links will first appear on the Scaling Pre-Sales LinkedIn group, which is the same place where we posted the Demo Fest links if you were able to attend Demo Fest. So go pay a visit to that LinkedIn group and join up if you want to get the links early. Also, there will be a Q&A session at the end of this session. So if you have any questions, be sure to post them into the Q&A section as opposed to the chat. And I'll be posting reminders there kind of throughout the session as well. Again, really excited to have Thomas here. And Thomas, a little bit about Thomas. He is responsible for solutions consulting enablement at Trintech EMEA. Focusing on continuous improvement of the department's efficiency and productivity, etc. This recently included spearheading the implementation of Consensus for EMEA. And as a qualified chartered accountant, he has a background in implementing SAP ERP. And Thomas now works at Trintech, helping large enterprises transform their financial processes. So Thomas is also the founder of The Modern SC, which is a website / blog focused on modern methods of solutions consulting and enablement, and as well as being a regular contributor to the Pre-Sales Collective, as I mentioned. So go and check out Thomas's website, check out his work on Pre-Sales Collective. He's really active in the space and brings fantastic insights. And without taking any more of your time, Thomas, I'd like to turn the time over. Thanks for being here.
All right, thank you, John. Really appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. You can tell me if you can see that.
Yes, sir.
Good stuff. All right, well, thank you very much. And I just wanted to say thank you to Consensus for hosting such a brilliant event. I followed pretty much every single session yesterday, and it's clearly been a success so far. So I've got a lot to live up to in this session. I wanted to start this just by calling out how much I think the pre-sales community has changed over the last 18 years. John, you mentioned that I contribute some stuff to the Pre-Sales Collective. That's a really new site, new initiative over the last year, where we've had loads of blogs, loads of webinars. We had Consensus hosting Demo Fest earlier this year. And now that we've got this user group around Consensus, I really think that it shows the maturity of this profession as a whole. So you guys are doing a great job.
we're really excited to see the groundswell around the pre-sale space, and it really finally getting, you know, attention as well as resources. Our hope is the resources and the strategic voice that it really deserves. So
Yeah, spot on. Good stuff. Okay, so the session, as John said, I'm going to be covering 6 types of video content to help progress your sales cycle. And this is all really coming from my personal experience from implementing Consensus in my organization, but also from all of the various different organizations that I've spoken to who are currently going through this process or have been through this process too. And I wanted to start with a question that I'd like to ask all of you who are attending. And that is, what percentage of demos were being wasted in your organization? And before answering, let me just talk you around this a little bit, because I think one of the big value drivers of implementing a tool like Consensus is really to increase the efficiency of pre-sales. A big part of that, reducing the number of wasted demos. What do we mean by wasted demos? Well, the way that I look at it is where you've got opportunities. You're hoping all of them will go towards a win, some will go towards a loss, but it's those which don't hit either of those, where they exit the sales cycle. It's demos performed on those kind of opportunities, which I see as being wasted demos. And we've all seen this, where an opportunity is asked, a prospect is asking for, you know, just an overview of your product, or perhaps you're getting a sales rep trying to push solutions consultants just to demo as quickly as possible to increase the velocity of that sales cycle. If those opportunities are not qualified enough, the chances are they'll exit the sales cycle, which means any demos or any work that was spent on that opportunity was ultimately wasted. So I want you to look at this. For those of you who have already implemented Consensus, look at this as pre-Consensus. What percentage of demos do you think were being wasted? If you haven't yet gone live with Consensus, perhaps what does this look like now? So if I could ask you just to type in a percentage into the chat panel so we can see, just to get a gauge of where we're standing with the audience here today. So it'd be great if you could share that. And while you're doing that, I'll give the audience 30 seconds or so to do that. I wonder if this will really depend on how people have really measured this. For my organization, a big driver for implementing Consensus was reducing the number of wasted demos. We had an inkling that it was quite high, but it wasn't until we actually measured it that it was, you know, quite a lot higher than we thought. So looking at things here, we've got Adam saying between 25 and 50%. We've got another 50%. We've got Galen saying 40%. Thank you all for all of these answers. So I think it's quite clear that pre-Consensus, sort of going down this road of automation, there's a lot of room for improvement, and that is absolutely what I saw from my perspective. We also saw a great session from Peter Cohen yesterday. I know that he said that he's seen up to 50% of demos being wasted on opportunities which simply go nowhere. So clearly this is a big value driver for implementing a tool like this. Now, I was in a completely similar situation going back a couple of years. I could see that a big proportion of the demos that I was performing as an individual contributor were on opportunities which simply exited the sales cycle. But that was just a bit of a finger in the air. I needed to see sort of what this looked like for the organization and for the team as a whole. So we set about measuring this. So we looked at all of the demos that had been performed over the year, and then compared that retrospectively, demos which had been performed on these ops which had exited. And the results were pretty staggering. I think these are really backed up from what we've seen in this poll, in this session. So naturally, we went out to market. My aim, well, I had 2 aims, was to increase the overall efficiency of pre-sales by reducing these number of wasted demos, but also to increase our level of qualification and discovery within opportunities to ensure that we aren't spending a lot of resources on these opportunities which will ultimately exit the sales cycle. We knew that video was probably the answer, but we didn't know exactly what that would look like or how. So we went to the market with quite an quite open-minded. And obviously, you know where that went, because we're all here today at the Consensus user group. We found that after implementing Consensus earlier this year, we significantly reduced the number of wasted demos. And another real big benefit we saw was increasing stakeholder discovery. So where previously we might have had quite a bit of risk in sales cycles and in the pipeline where you've got a bit of a key man dependency, suddenly now we've now got that visibility of where these videos, where these demos are being shared to. We're discovering those new stakeholders. And probably most importantly is prospects are now coming educated to the first live demo. They've already seen an overview of our product. It means that, first of all, stakeholders get more out of it because they can ask more informed questions. They've got an idea of what the product does. But equally, it's a lot more fulfilling for solutions consultants because our guys can add so much more value. They can work at a more strategic level because they're adding more value into that opportunity. There was another great session yesterday by Andy Paul. He was talking about how discovery, you need to really uncover the context of the project. What's really driving it? It's not just about understanding the pain points. What's the bigger picture? And if we can be sending out these automated demonstrations to stakeholders, suddenly now your solutions consultants can spend a lot more time actually digging into the detail and understanding the context of these opportunities, so we can become more trusted advisors that'll ultimately help influence that opportunity as a whole. So it was off the back of all of this, with this demo automation, that we said, what's next? What's the next thing that we can do to utilize Consensus to bring video into the sales cycle? And that's exactly what this talk is about today. Here's a brief agenda. First of all, I'm going to be talking about our adoption over time, what I've seen in my organization, but also similarly what I've seen in other organizations when talking to them. We started small and gradually got bigger in terms of the rollout, in terms of the adoption. And hopefully that'll put into a bit of perspective the 6 types of video that we've discovered and that we regularly utilizing within the sales cycle. And I'm going to take you through each one of these 6 types of video. Hopefully you'll learn something from this. It might get you thinking about new ways that you're not using Consensus for currently, but also just from sitting in those sessions yesterday and earlier today in this conference, there's even more out there that goes even beyond what we're going to show in this session. So I think the possibilities of what you can use Consensus for really are limitless. The final thing that I want to cover is just going into a deep dive of how we managed that content creation and what we learned going through that process. Hopefully you can learn something from that too. So with that, let's go into this adoption. We initially, when we first rolled out, we took the decision to go, well, I guess it was a bit of a balancing act. We wanted to go as small as possible because this was something very new. Consensus, as far as I've seen, there's not much else out there that does this. So it's not like we're building on a lot of knowledge about delivering personalized automated demos. This is something that's new for a lot of people. So we took the decision that we wanted to go small as possible with the acknowledgement that this is going to be an iterative process. We needed a good feedback loop. We needed to be able to change tact a little bit based on demand. But then on the other side of it, we needed enough content in the tool to ensure that we got really good utilization from our sales reps from day one. So we actually first went live with, I think it was 2 or 3 standard demos. And we really just looked at the demos that had been performed over the last year and said, what are the parts of the product or which individual products are the ones which are causing us to do these harbor tour type demos? And that's what we focused on. So it was really taking a bit of an 80-20 approach. So we had enough content there for the sales reps to really utilize, but there was still plenty of room for us to expand the content. I think in terms of utilization, it was really, really important to acknowledge the wins really early on. I was doing a weekly newsletter celebrating where we'd moved deals to the next stage, where we'd utilized consensus. And I think that really, really helped. The next phase was, first of all, to use that feedback loop from sales reps, from solutions consultants, to be able to build on the content that was already there. So based on demand, be able to expand, but also because of the way that the demos are actually constructed within Consensus, if there's just one small 3 or 4 minute segment that we need to re-record, we can absolutely do that without pulling apart an entire demo, which is really, really good for this iterative approach to improve over time. We also started looking into advanced demos, and this is something that I'll cover towards the back end of this session, where we looked at branching questions for things like languages, where you're selling to stakeholders across multiple countries for a single opportunity, or where you've got different personas within that opportunity. We also, at that point, started to look beyond these standard or advanced demos. What else could we use Consensus for within pre-sales, but perhaps later on in the sales cycle? So we started to look at things like frequently asked questions and objection handling type videos. And I'll take you through some of these. And a lot of those came sort of later on in the sales cycle. Beyond that, our next step was then to say, what can come before the initial overview demo? These were typically marketing-led videos. And I'll take you through 3 different types of video content that are owned and created by marketing. And also video voicemails is the next topic that I'll talk to you about, how we can really get more engagement very, very early on in the sales cycle, early on in that opportunity before they've even seen the product. So that was really our journey, our adoption over time. And that's how we came about discovering these 6 different types of video, which is what I'm going to take you through now. And the first one that we've got here is the video voicemail. I think video voicemail, you can call it whatever you want, but really this is a very short video that you're sending to a prospect of you talking to a camera specifically to them. And I actually first came up with this idea. I've got to give a shout out to Don Carmichael, because this is where we got the idea from. It was a training session a couple of years ago that Don was coming into my organization for, and he sent out a 2-minute video just to all the attendees. And really it was just to say what to expect in the training and any prep that people had to do. Now, of course, it was a short video. He absolutely could have put that into an email. But what was really good is, and you can do this for demos, you can do this with sales meetings too, is first of all, it puts a face to the name. It puts a face to the voice as well. I think it really starts to break down barriers with your stakeholders. So if you're going to be going into a demo or a sales presentation, you want to already have a bit of a relationship with those stakeholders so they can ask the challenging questions or help you uncover these pain points or specific needs. So by having that, even though it's one-way interaction, I really think it helps mentally just to form a bit of a relationship for the prospect and for that stakeholder. The other side of this is where you're using it very, very early in the sales cycle. Like if your business development reps are using it, marketing tech has become so advanced. I'm naturally very skeptical of any email that I get into my inbox, because although it looks like it's very personalized, it's coming from a person, how do I know that it's not automated and it's gone to 1,000 people? If we send over a 30-second or 1-minute video of me talking specifically to you, the stakeholder, it's very clear that this is very, very personalized. It's that personal touch, which helps build a connection. Within Consensus, we are encouraging these to be about 30 seconds long. These are being used primarily by our business development reps to help form a relationship with stakeholders, utilizing Consensus Snap. So simply recording these through a web browser. And of course, the next step would be to have sales and pre-sales use these later on in the sales process to help build that relationship too. The second type of video that we have is a vision video. And this is the kind of video that it doesn't yet include any kind of product. It's not a demonstration. It's more, what is the value that your organization brings to prospects? I've seen a lot of organizations having things like an animation either on their website or on their YouTube channel. And that's exactly what this is for. So this will be the kind of content that you've probably already got within your organization. It might be 2 or 3 minutes. Again, it would be used early on in the sales cycle when it's introducing a prospect to your organization, created by marketing, utilizing a single video demo within Consensus. So it's very easy to take that existing content, put it into Consensus, and you can get all the analytics from that. The third one, and this is the final one, which is really owned by marketing or sent out by business development, are case studies and testimonials. So this might be something like an explainer of how one of your biggest customers, what ROI they've achieved. Or it might be a testimonial, like a piece to camera from one of those individual stakeholders talking about the successes using one of your products. Again, I'm guessing this is the kind of content that you've probably already got set up and produced within your organization, certainly the situation that we were in. And again, it's created by marketing. Length, perhaps it's 2 minutes, perhaps it's 4 minutes. We're using this relatively early on in the sales cycle as well, but it's also available to the sales reps to use later on as well. And again, we've loaded this into Consensus with this single video demo format. So really, those first three, they are for being utilized quite early on in the sales cycle. The next three are the ones which we see as being owned by pre-sales. And number 4 is the overview demo. And really, this is where I'd expect the biggest value driver to be coming from Consensus. This is the type of video content which is ultimately going to reduce the number of wasted demos. This is really where you're going to get the return on investment from Consensus. I've heard of several organizations, including my own, where they won't release any pre-sales resources to an opportunity until those stakeholders have all watched an overview demo. So straight away, it means you don't have pre-sales or solutions consultants working on underqualified opportunities, but it also means that you've got those stakeholders coming to the first live demo educated. They can ask more informed questions. They've got an understanding of what it is that your product does. They've had a look and feel. So it means you can go deeper into the discovery. You can understand the context that we talked about, that Andy Paul was talking about yesterday. And you can get right into the detail rather than giving this art of the possible or harbor tour type demo. In Consensus, we're saying that an overview demo is up to 20 minutes. And in the next section, I'm going to be talking about how we went about creating that content. Now, typically these overview demos, these are being sent out by sales, but created by pre-sales. And this is where you can use it either as a standard demo within Consensus or as an advanced demo if you want one of those branching questions. We'll explore some of those details very shortly. So the next one is really even later in the sales cycle. Objection handling. Now, of course, we're always going to have objections. If you're not getting an objection in a demo, that makes me a bit concerned, because it makes me question, are the stakeholders really engaged in this demonstration? So I think objections are pretty much always a good thing, but it's just about how we handle those objections. And what we found is that, of course, you still need to handle that objection during the demonstration. But if you can send out a video after the fact just to solidify how you've handled that objection and to show how you can solve a specific challenge, I think that can really resonate with prospects and ensure that they are satisfied that we've covered off this objection. The other side of this is if you're in a demonstration and you get a question, but actually the answer is, yes, we can do that. but it's a bit of a left field question. We can't demonstrate that right now, but perhaps with a bit of config, I could easily show that. So what we've done with these types of objections, we've actually recorded them in a bespoke way for that prospect to send it out as a follow-up video, perhaps within 24 hours, just to show that, yeah, we really can do that. What we've done is we've set up standard objection handling type videos between 3 and 6 minutes, sent out by pre-sales as the trusted advisor, but also created by pre-sales. And again, these would be single video demos. Now, the length here is really going to be dependent on the complexity of the challenge or of the objection. And these are really simple to build up over time, because as you get a new objection, you might need to create a new video. But of course, then that can be stored in your library for future use. The big benefit that we found from all of this, from the overview demos and the objection handling demos, is you can also create a great library of video content that you can use as part of your onboarding bootcamp as well. So you can say, this is how we can best combat this kind of objection in a sales cycle. The sixth and final type of video content is our frequently asked questions. And you might think, well, this sounds a little bit similar to objection handling, but actually I see this as a little bit more complex. My organization, we sell accounting software to accountants. So a typical sales demo, you might have 5 stakeholders who are accountants and perhaps 1 person from IT. Now that person from IT might ask a really relevant question around the technical details of how you integrate your solution with system XYZ. It might be a really relevant question. It might not be an objection at all. And it's the kind of question where you might want to go into quite a bit of detail. You could demonstrate integrations or whatever it is that question was, but you're at risk of alienating every other person in the room. So what we found, and this is really, really useful, with Consensus, we can give a high-level answer and then send out a Consensus demo as a follow-up that'll go into a lot more detail to cover off any of these frequently asked questions. Now, for that reason, it's used by pre-sales, created by pre-sales. And the difference here is we're utilizing a standard demo. So it can go into quite a bit more depth than these objection handling videos. The benefit here as well is that I know a lot of organizations have got a standard list of their most frequently asked questions, their most frequently asked objections. So that can be the perfect starting point to create these objection handling or frequently asked question demos within Consensus that you can easily send out as a follow-up, or even if a sales rep or a pre-sales consultant gets that question over email, you can simply send back a video which properly explains it in a bit more depth, which is always going to be better than an email, and it's going to be better than going into too much depth in front of the wrong stakeholders. So hopefully that's given you a really good idea of the 6 types of video that we're currently using in our sales process. But there is so much more, as we've heard from the other sessions during this Consensus User Group conference. Yesterday, something that really resonated with me was Todd Jansen from Salesforce. He spoke about selling in the gaps. And I know there's a few other companies doing this, where you're sending out a Snap demo through Consensus Snap, through your plugin in your browser. And you can do this during the sales cycle to explain a document, explain a return on investment calculation, or walking them through a contract or pricing, for example. This is something that I've not covered here, but there's so much scope to go beyond this. And I really do think some of the opportunities for utilizing Consensus, they're pretty much endless. So with that, let me take you just into the final section here. I want to take you into a bit of a deep dive of how we actually created this content for Consensus. And because the main topic here is around the overview demo, that personalized type demo using either the standard or the advanced demo type in Consensus, that's what I'm going to be focusing on. And the approach that I see to have been the best approach here is by ensuring, first of all, that all demos are of a maximum 20 minutes. What we found earlier on, that we had some demos which were more than 20 minutes, and we were starting to see a drop-off. And I'm convinced that that drop-off isn't necessarily because of the quality of the content or because stakeholders were bored. I think it's often because they might just have something else to do, or time's not on their side that day. And unfortunately, that affects the analytics that you can get out of Consensus. But also, if you put a gate at the end of your demonstration where they can share, or a prompt where they can share that demo with other people, if they don't get to the end of that demo, they're not going to see that. So that's why I've been aiming to make any demos maximum 20 minutes. Now, you still might be saying, well, 20 minutes is still quite a long time for people to sit through. But you've got to bear in mind that not every single person is going to mark every feature as very important. So we're utilizing both short and long versions of each feature. Short, 2 to 3 minutes, long, 4 to 5. So if someone is selecting some features as very important, others as somewhat important, and others as not important at all, the chances are your stakeholders aren't actually going to be watching 20 minutes of content. It'll be more likely 10 to 15 minutes based on what they've answered. The other thing that we've learned while putting together these demonstrations is that I reckon 6 features is about the optimum. And it was great hearing Tony from Thomson Reuters yesterday. He was saying they're doing between 5 and 7 features for each demo. So it's great to hear another organization doing it in the same way. So, because I think it really solidifies that. I think if you're going for like 9 or 10 or even more features, it's a lot for a user to actually click on, and suddenly it doesn't feel as frictionless to actually get to that demonstration. While we're here, let's just talk about what's actually in these features too. I think some advice that I would give to anyone who is just starting to go through this implementation process is, I think it's important to look at the bigger picture. Even if what you're going to roll out initially is going to be quite small, just a couple of maybe 2 or 3 standard demos for your sales reps to send out, having an idea of what you want the bigger picture to look like, I think is really important, because then it just makes it a lot easier as you're going through that implementation, which features you're going to include in which demo. And what we found is where you've got demos which might just be a part of one product, you might have overlap between 2 different demos, which means you'll get the same feature actually being in 2 different demonstrations. So that's definitely something to consider when you're building out this content. The other thing that we found was, historically in a demonstration, you might have like a day in the life type story or journey of a user persona. When putting it into Consensus, I think you've really got to change your mindset in terms of how you're demonstrating the product, because you can no longer guarantee what order a stakeholder is going to see these features in, because it's going to be dependent on how they prioritize these features. You can't even guarantee that a stakeholder's going to see this specific feature. So each individual video really has to work as a standalone video. And we've gone at that by creating each individual one is a tell, show, tell with a value driver behind it. So they can all be standalone videos within a wider demonstration, but then they can also be used, these individual features, in multiple demonstrations. The next stage then is plugging this into an advanced demo. And I mentioned at the beginning of this session that Cadency really lends itself to growth and this rollout, because as you make these individual features, they can occur in multiple demonstrations. So you're not duplicating your work. But also, you can start with these standard demonstrations, which you roll out to your sales reps. And then as you build on them, they can simply plug into an advanced type demonstration. So we've investigated a couple of different things. I've heard a couple of organizations doing similar things too. Where we're selling into a into a large enterprise type organization, it's very likely to have stakeholders in different geographies. So to avoid them having to watch a demonstration in their second language, instead, you can set up that branching stage that says simply, what's your preferred language? So they can see the exact same content, but just delivered by a different solutions consultant in their native language, which I think has been really beneficial because it feels very tailored to them. They can see it in their own language. The other thing that I've seen a lot of organizations starting to do this is to have a persona-driven advanced demonstration. And I think this is really interesting, and I'm sure this is where a lot of organizations will be looking to go to, because it's very frequent that you'll be wanting to demonstrate the same features, the same functionality within your solution. But when you've got, if you're doing it live, if you've got a mixed group of stakeholders, that can be very challenging to draw out both the strategic benefits to people higher up in the organization, as well as the very tactical, operational type benefits for the end users, like day-to-day efficiency. What Consensus does is if you split it by persona, your different personas can see different variants of a demonstration, but still looking at the same functionality. So based on that branching stage, an end user gets to see just those value drivers or benefits specific for operational type users, whereas the people who are more senior, more likely to be decision makers, will see things which are most pertinent to them, whether that is visibility, risk mitigation, or overall efficiency savings too. So hopefully that's given you some ideas of how you can be tailoring your content a little bit further down the line, dependent on your maturity and the stage that you've got with your rollout with Consensus. So we've looked at how my organization, and I think plenty of other organizations, have adopted Consensus over time, ensuring that they've got that good early utilization by sales reps from the first few weeks, ideally, and then rolling it out to a broader audience. We've looked at these 6 different types of videos, and of course, there are so many more applications of Consensus beyond that. And then finally, looked at how we've built up some of these bits of content over time. Hopefully you found this useful. As John said, we've got some time at the end to cover any of your questions and answers. So please do, if you haven't already, drop some of your questions into the Q&A panel in Zoom. And while I just let you do that just for 30 minutes, I'm going to give a completely shameless plug for my blog, because as we all know, pre-sales is all about continuous learning. Whether that is learning about your technology, whether it's learning about the domain and the value that your product brings to your prospects, but also learning about new techniques, new best practices within pre-sales, which is exactly what Consensus is all about. I actually started this personal blog. It was really just a personal project for reflective learning. I set it up as a blog so that I had a bit more accountability, so that I was sort of forcing myself to put down learnings and my thoughts on a weekly basis. But as a result, actually, a lot of the stuff on there is related to Consensus or demo automation. It's what I've been spending a lot of my time on in 2020. So please do check it out, and hopefully you find it useful. So with that, hopefully,
so cool.
John, have we got any questions through?
We've got some coming in, and we're going to try and get to all.
I think you're muted, John.
Oh, am I muted? Can you hear me now? I'm showing as unmuted.
Sorry, it was my mistake. My speaker's rough.
All right, awesome. I'm like, wait a minute. Technical difficulty. All right, so thanks for that. I'm really excited to dive into the modern SC, actually, because we're, one of the things we, Garen and I had a conversation toward the end of our fiscal year last year, saying, what are going to be our big movers for the coming year. And I said, it's got to be community, because the pre-sales community is so ripe for, and they don't have a gathering place right now. This is before, pre-sales collective came about or any of that kind of thing. And so it's really wonderful to see these resources springing up, and I'm really excited to dive into the modern SC. So with regard to questions, I'm just going to dive into a couple of these. Make sure you get them into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to all of them. One of the questions, here's one question that I'm really interested to hear the answer to is, do you find different types of video are more or less effective for different market segments, like presumably talking about SMB or mid-market or enterprise?
That's really interesting. And actually, I would love to hear other people's ideas on this. I mean, perhaps that's a whole topic in itself. In my organization, we've actually only rolled Consensus out to our large enterprise part of the business. So we're really dealing with large opportunities where you've got a very large number of stakeholders. And that has been really, really useful. I think we've probably seen the most success in terms of discovering stakeholders and open rates with the overview demos. That is, of course, the biggest value of Consensus. And we heard in Don Carmichael's session yesterday that they think that it's more than 10 individuals who are now involved in the buying process in terms of the actual decision-making process. So I think uncovering stakeholders for enterprise level opportunities, and I'm sure every type of opportunity, is now so important. So that's one of the big drivers and values that we've seen out of Consensus. I can't really answer in terms of sort of mid-market and smaller parts of the market. That's absolutely something that I would personally love to hear about.
I can shed a little bit of light, because we have. It's funny that you have rolled it out initially to large enterprise only. There are several other organizations that we've spoken to that are customers, where they're like, well, we want to roll it out, to smaller first and work up, because we're not entirely sure about using it in large enterprise, right? And so it's really interesting to see different organizations coming at it from different ends of that spectrum. We've seen, for instance, if you check out the Consensus, the Demo Fest session from SAP, Brian Oling, if you want to check out the way SAP Concur rolled it out, they started on the lower end and built it up. And so if you want more clarity on that, you can check out the Demo Fest session on that topic. We've got, short answer is, it works great on the low end, on the lower end of the segments as well. So really stoked to hear your experience on the high end as well, Thomas. Another question coming in from Connie. Do you have a best practice document for outlining the content of overview demos?
What a great question. The way that I'm taking this in terms of best practice for people actually creating the videos. It should be said that our pre-sales consultants are responsible for creating all of the demo type videos, anything that involves the product, basically, which I definitely think is the right way to go. So we have, of course, created sort of style guides and best practice documents so that we've got consistency. So we are using sort of everyone across the pre-sales team to create these demos, but making them as consistent as possible, using sort of the same wording, same terminology across. So when you do watch one of these demonstrations, you'll get different features that might actually be voiced by different individuals, but it's about having that consistency with that style guide.
Awesome. Connie just clarified, not looking for technical production, but more around the content itself. So let's see, outlining the content of overview demos. So how deep do you get, for instance, and how is it governed by time? Is it governed by, what are your governing factors there?
So it's something that we put a lot of work into right at the initial stage before we even started making any videos, was to work out in this demo how much depth do we want to go into for the product? What is it exactly is it for? And we've taken the approach that we want it to be high level enough that it grabs the attention of stakeholders, so that they want to hear more. And it's that more that then drives them towards a live demonstration where we can really drill in specifically to their specific requirements, and do deeper discovery, because that's the aim of the game here, so that we can become more influential in that sales cycle. So yeah, absolutely. Outlining the content, outlining what each individual feature, that was a big part of it before we even got close to creating any video content.
Fantastic. Now, I actually have a question that I'm going to follow up here with, but the what's the difference? So let's say you're jumping into a pre-sales meeting, first meeting with a prospect for pre-sales. Okay, this is pre-sales first meeting. What's the difference in meetings between a first meeting where they've seen an overview demo and a first meeting where they haven't seen an overview demo?
I've got a brilliant story of this. This is a bit of personal experience. This was when I really realized the value of Consensus, was when we'd sent out one of these first demo overview videos. All the stakeholders in the opportunity had watched this. I went in to have a live demo, and of course, there's one part of the product. Everyone has this in their product. One part of your product that you always want to show because that's the main bit. And I said, look, I know that you would have seen this in the demo. Should we go back over it? And they said, no, we don't need to, because they'd already seen it. And because of that, we were able to spend pretty much the entirety of that demonstration on differentiators and the parts of the product which are going to really specifically help that particular prospect, rather than showing, the main bit of the product that all your competitors can do. I think that's the big thing, because you can really get into the detail and add so much more value after everyone's already seen that overview demo.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Thomas, for sharing that. So let's talk about now. Connie was not looking for technical production, but it looks like we've got a question around production value. So can you talk about production value? You got pre-sales creating this. Do you worry about high production value? Do you worry about what's the big driver? What's your guiding star when it comes to how produced a given video is?
Do you know what? I've spoken to quite a few different organizations about this and it seems like lots of different companies have got quite different approaches to this. Our approach was very much natural, sort of try to have it almost like how you would have a web demo, but putting it into Consensus, because I think that's really important for building up a relationship. At the end of the day, people buy from people. And if it looks like a very, very highly produced marketing video, in my opinion, it doesn't always resonate in the same way. So I think that's really important, so that you've got it in the control of pre-sales to deliver this and really deliver it in the way that they would a demonstration. I suppose a big side benefit of that has really been that it's made us rethink how we demonstrate products. Because suddenly you're having to think about what is the value of this specific part of the product or of this feature. Because when you're having to put them into these standalone features within Consensus, every single one's got to have a benefit or a value. So actually, I think going through this process of recording videos, I think it can really help your live demonstrations as well, as if you're doing them in a very much the same way. So I think the short answer is keep it natural, keep it as aligned as possible to the live demos, because it'll help your live demos, but also helps people be more engaged, and it feels more like just a live demo when they're watching that.
Cool. Now, would you say that that's the case all the way across? I know you mentioned that some of the initial demos might be marketing demos. Like, how do you see that transition going from, something that marketing might participate in through to this more transparent, authentic video that pre-sales might create?
I think, of course, they're going to be very different. On the product side, we're trying to keep it as natural as possible, so it sort of emulates what a live demo would look like, because that's ultimately the stage that they're going to get to. Whereas, of course, the marketing side of things, it's always going to be very highly produced. That's certainly the approach that we've taken. And I know that a few other companies that I've spoken to, where you're taking this great content that probably already exists in your organization, whether that's things like testimonials, case studies. Often it's not about re-recording all of this content. It might just be plugging it into Consensus so that you can get all the benefit of discovering stakeholders, all the analytics from that.
Very cool. I wish we had time for more. Thomas, thank you so much for coming out and for participating. We've got a couple of sessions coming up, so I'm just going to share what we've got going over here. So whoops, that's not the one. So we've got coming up, we have, I'm not sure if you guys can see all this stuff. I'm gonna get rid of that. We've got Amy Gordon talking about content creation, what comes after content creation. So a great segue from you from this session, Thomas. And then Best Run Demolytics with Alex Asmus from SAP Concur. So don't forget to jump in on those. And we want to thank everybody for coming out. And we'll catch you on the next session. Thanks, everyone.